Hello and a very warm welcome to you all. My name is Kalvinder Shields. I'm the Assistant Dean of Graduate Research in the Faculty of Business and Economics. Just a quick overview of what tonight's about, and let me say up front, if at any time you have any questions, please do ask them by putting them in the chat. We'll start by an overview of our doctoral programs. They are quite unique in Australia, and we'll cover some important information about the program structure, the scholarships, and why you might want to do your PhD with us at the University of Melbourne. And then we will have a panel where I'll be joined by the Graduate Research Co-Director of the Doctoral Program in Management Marketing and 3 of our current PhD students. 3 departments: Management Marketing, Decision Risk and Financial Sciences, and Finance. And we will engage in a panel discussion where they will discuss their experience of the doctoral program. So as I said, if you have any questions, there'll be time at the end, but feel free to write any questions, any comments throughout the whole session, and we will get back to you during this webinar. So before I start, as with any important meeting in Australia, let's start by acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people. They are the traditional owners of the unceded land on which the Parkville campus stands. So that's where the main campus is at the University of Melbourne. We take a moment to pay respect to their elders, past and present, and including all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be with us here today. So very, very warm, heartfelt welcome. So why would you want to do a PhD? So before I start why you might want to do a PhD and what the doctoral programs here are like, let me just sort of start my discussion, my presentation by saying upfront that our PhD program and our graduate research students are very important to us. We invest in them in order to support them to be both impactful global research leaders, but also for them to be the best of themselves. So we genuinely care about quality education, as well as promoting a healthy, positive culture and community. So why would you want to do a PhD in the first place? So if you'd like to have a career in academia, then you will require a PhD. But you may not want to go for a career in academia, but it is increasingly the case that other career paths involving some level of research skills are also requiring a PhD nowadays. So this is particularly important for positions in government, especially if you want to progress into leadership positions, as well as research consultancy bodies. But our doctoral programs are quite unique and quite valuable because they have 2 years of advanced level coursework, and these 2 years will give you a very solid foundation for your career, but also you'll have all the skills that come from doing a thesis, from creative and independent thinking to knowing how to conduct analyses to written and oral communication, etc. But it is a commitment, so it's something that you really need to think about. It is 5 to 5.5 years of your life, and it's important to note that just because you like and are good at coursework, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will enjoy research. And so it's not always an easy transition, but we do support you as much as we can in that transition, and especially through the coursework where the first year is sort of core skills, core knowledge, and the second year we start to transition you into the research phase. So you really have an idea whether you are comfortable in that environment. Of course, there's no guarantee of an academic job at the end, although our programs are designed to prepare you for academic careers, and particularly so that you are internationally competitive also. And you'll see some of our placements later that you can see where they have been placed internationally. And finally, it's just really important to note that this is a competitive process here, and we have a limited number of places. We do fund them, and so if you are interested in here, do take time to prepare your application and just give yourself the best possible chance. Okay, so I was talking a little bit about the programs designed to for graduate students who are internationally competitive, and here's just a few of our recent graduates in terms of their first placements. So we have Booth School of Business, the University of Chicago, Tilburg School of Management, AGC Business, Paris Business School, University of Manchester, Oxford, and Warwick. So these students don't only come from Department of Marketing and Management, they are from accounting, from economics, from finance, from etc., etc. So actuarial studies, and we have 8 disciplines, in fact, in the faculty. And so, but in general, you will find in Australia, Melbourne staff and alumni actually make up quite a significant network of global leaders, influencers, innovators, and our alumni include Governor Generals, former Prime Ministers of Australia, Nobel laureates, and a number of Olympic medalists as well. So quite a broad range of excellence. So let's talk about the PhD program and a bit about the structure and the kind of support that you will expect to receive if you undertake the program. So as an overview, as I mentioned earlier, the doctoral program includes 2 additional years of coursework to the standard Australian 3-year PhD research degree. The first year is a full year of training in the core subjects, and the second year you advance into narrow fields of study which are more suitable to your area of interest, which you will probably start to identify by the end of the first year. It's the premier program, not only because of its placements, because it was a pioneer program. All programs in the faculty, they were the first in Australia to go with a 5-year to 6-year program. And so we've had a lot of time to really refine what excellence looks like. So the structure 2+3, at the end, you will earn both a master's degree and a PhD. And there's a hurdle requirement at the end of year 1 coursework to year 2, and then year 2 to the actual research doctoral phase. So what kind of support do you receive once you're here? So from 2024, so next year onwards, our stipends are competitive Australia-wide, where you will get $37,000 per year and waived tuition fees for up to 5.5 years. So every student who's made an offer of a place, they will also receive a stipend as well, or it is competitive. Every application is competitive. Other support is that if you are overseas, then you will be given a relocation allowance from around up to $3,000. If you are interstate, then you will receive $2,000. Top-up funding. So once you are confirmed in your research phase of your degree, there's an enhancement grant of the amount $15,000, and that's available for travel, for research, for experiments and conferences, and etc., and any research-related requirements that you might have. We also have a faculty travelling scholarship scheme, which runs twice a year, and up to $2,000 available is available, and matching funding is paid by the department as well. So this is for overseas travel, domestic travel, and that's to really support your research experience and your networking experience, not only domestically but also internationally. So that's pretty important to us. And of course, you are provided with an office, a workstation, computer support, etc. And we also have an amazing FE PhD Student Society. So this is across the faculty. So we have many departments. So this really is an opportunity for all the students across departments to come together and engage in academic activities, fun activities, social activities, networking activities. And you also have your own common room space as well, which is actually in a beautiful building. So that's the kind of support structure that you will receive when you're here. So why choose Melbourne? So just looking at 2023 data, it's still these are the facts on the right hand side of your screen. It has amazing food, has incredible festivals that all come to Melbourne, sporting events, so you would know Grand Prix, tennis, and footy, etc., etc. It's known as the culture capital of Australia, and it really has the best transport system as well. So in the city, we're not too far from the city, transport is free, and around the city, it's actually really, really reasonable. There's a great tram structure that goes across Melbourne. So let's have a look at a video, and you can get a snapshot visually of what Melbourne's like. Thank you for that video. So that is really only the beginning, and they were all snapshots of the University of Melbourne Central Campus and all the buildings that you would recognise around where we are located, at the heart of the campus. So that's almost enough from me. Let's hear from others and their experiences about the programme. So I'm going to invite 4 people to come onto a panel. So first of all, let me invite Andrew Yu, who's an associate professor and the co-director of the PhD programme for the Department of Marketing and Management at the University of Melbourne. Andrew received his doctorate in organisational behaviour and human resource management from the Eli Broad's Graduate School of Management at the Michigan State University. His research focuses on understanding the psychology of how people interact at work to inform leaders and decision makers within organizations about creating effective, collaborative, and sustainable workplaces. So welcome, Andrew. Thank you for coming. Kane. So Kane Ko is an associate lecturer and final year PhD candidate at the Department of Management and Marketing. His main interests revolve around content monetization on live streaming platforms, while his methods research interests are around marketing science, time series modeling, machine learning, etc. He's also won a few significant awards and research grants. Welcome, Kane, and thanks for coming tonight. Michelle Lee. Michelle is a 4th year PhD student in Decision Risk and Financial Sciences at the Centre for Brain, Mind and Markets, which is a centre located in the Department of Finance. Her research interests are in experimental and behavioural finance, with a particular focus on the complexity of financial decision-making in credit cards and insurance products. So welcome, Michelle, and thank you so much for coming tonight. And finally, Yu-Yang Zhang. Yu-Yang is a 5th year PhD student in the Department of Finance. Her research interests are in empirical corporate finance and corporate governance, and she's focusing on the impact of corporate insiders on ESG practices. She actually worked in corporate banking before pursuing her PhD, so that's an interesting transition, Yu-Yang. So welcome, Yu-Yang, and welcome to you all. So let me start with Andrew. So Andrew, why should someone who's considering a PhD in management marketing select the University of Melbourne as their destination?
Well, Kalvinder, that's a very good question to lead off with. As you've stated, we do have this very unique 5-year program in Australia. So students enter the program and they get training at the advanced doctoral level. So you're not just taking regular master's subjects, but you're actually getting advanced training. And this allows students to kind of figure out what their specific research interests are and develop their dissertation topics. So in our department, which is very similar to the other departments in the faculty, we provide a lot of opportunity to work with different academics just throughout the coursework stage before they enter their PhD specific research. So what this does is allows you as applicants and students to figure out which supervisor may be the best match to help you develop in your PhD journey. And so finally, as you've mentioned, our graduates have gone on to take on great academic positions at top universities. But our recent alumni event in our department has also shown that our graduates have went out to industry to become CEOs and leading leaders in the industry around Melbourne and Australia as well. So that about covers it from my end here. Kalvinder, maybe you have more to add.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. I forgot to say earlier that if you want to know where our students have been placed going back to 2017, you can go to the website that you'll see at the end of the presentation, and hopefully, yeah, see how they're placed in academia and industry and government, and that will give their first placements as well. So thanks, Andrew. So Andrew, can you talk a little bit about the support structure that you offer students in your doctoral program? And I think that's something of interest for all students coming here.
Yeah, that's definitely something similar that's offered throughout all the departments that I've seen in our faculty. So our program is very similar in that a lot of the supervisors have regular meetings with their students. And this is just to make sure that all the students are on track so that we can keep providing guidance when needed throughout each student's PhD training. So our department also hosts a lot of brown bag sessions, which give students the opportunity to learn things beyond just their formal coursework. So for example, we've had various guest speakers come and present from international universities about their specific research topics, which enhances our students' learning for different, maybe research topics within their field. And then this year, the most exciting session for myself and also from the feedback from the students was learning about all the difficulties and even the worst failures that some of our professors have gone through in their careers. So there's also a very strong sense of community between not just the academics and the students, but also between all the students. So PhD, from all of our experiences, is a very long journey. And the social support that you're going to get from each other is going to be very important, not just during the doctoral program, but also when you launch into your career. So this is actually one of the specific research topics that one of my PhD students is working with me on.
That's fantastic, Andrew. And I think you highlight, a couple of things, that it's not a straight road and everybody fails. And it's like how you then, change or pivot or make use of support structures, but also the support structures, it's your colleagues and your peers and the faculty as well. And you have to, whilst your PhD is a singular journey, it's actually part of a community as well. So thank you for that. So Kane, let me start with you. Why did you want to undertake a PhD, and why did you choose Melbourne?
Okay, so undertaking anything is a choice, and choices happen through motivations. And I was internally and externally motivated for this program. Internally, I would say I am a logical and curious person, and with so much misinformation and misunderstanding out there, research helps to create a better world by providing some clarity. Pursuing something that aligns with who I am while doing some sort of social good was a no-brainer for me. Externally, well, no matter who you are or what you do, the future is always uncertain, especially for us university students. Money, career, happiness are three primary concerns that the PhD program catered to. We get a stipend, insurance, no school fees. The career path is mostly straightforward. And even if you don't want to pursue a PhD, you can still leave this program with a Master's of Commerce without having to pay anything back to the university. We call it a PhD program, but I call it a safety net. And as for why I chose Melbourne, I would say that Melbourne chose me rather than me choosing it. I've been here for the last 6 years, and I've done both my undergrad and my master's at the University of Melbourne and fell in love with it in my first semester here. So I would say that I do like it quite a bit, otherwise I wouldn't have been here for so long. So for context, I'm originally from Singapore, and even though life is pretty good there in terms of culture and things like that, it didn't really quite fit me, and I took the opportunity to come all the way to Melbourne. And I think the most important thing for me over here is that there is a cocktail of cultures and everyone seems to prioritize work-life balance. And that's super important when it comes to a PhD or anything beyond a PhD, to be honest.
And that's fantastic. You just mentioned something really important, work-life balance. And this is something that we talk about, throughout from my initial orientation to our end of year event. We always have a well-being session, and we really, if we are not well physically, mentally, then emotionally, then we actually don't work very well. So that's a very useful, important point. I'm going to ask the same question to Michelle and then Yu Yang, but maybe start with Michelle first. And thank you for the questions coming through. I will certainly get to them, but let's just hear a bit about from Michelle and Yu Yang. Why did you want to undertake a PhD, and why did you choose Melbourne? So Michelle first.
Yeah, so I chose to do a PhD because I was very interested in looking at how people make decisions. And I guess I wasn't very satisfied in how the industry was doing research in general. And I wanted to learn a more controlled and systematic way of collecting data and analyzing data. And that's why I decided to do a PhD, because that's where you really hone your research skills and learn different methodologies to do the research and answer the questions that you're really passionate about. And so my research interest is in behavioral finance or experimental finance. And so I love running behavioral experiments here. And it's great that we have an amazing experimental lab facility here that allows you to run individual, group, and even eye tracking experiments. So I have a lot of projects that involves eye tracking, and I really enjoyed that. And I think that was probably why I decided to do my research at the University of Melbourne as well, that there's these facilities and resources available for me to use and do my research in. Yeah.
Michelle, that's amazing. I think doing further education, doctoral education, it sort of teaches you how to think, and your research is actually understanding how others think as well. And every time I hear about a tracking system, it's world-class technology, and the fact that you can use it in your doctoral program, that's incredible. So yeah,
I really enjoyed it.
Yu Yang, why did you want to undertake a PhD, and why Melbourne?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me today. So after completing my Master of Finance degree, which was also at Melbourne University, as Kalvinder mentioned, that I actually worked in a commercial bank. I was a relationship manager in corporate banking. So in my work, I realized that there were lots of rule of thumb for people to use in the everyday decision making. But I was very curious about why this will work. And sometimes it don't work. Why it doesn't work? So I want to study what's the mechanism behind, and also are these rules empirically correct? And doing academic research, and naturally a PhD seems to be an excellent way to fulfill such curiosity. In terms of the job, I remember at the PhD interview, the faculty member was very clear that this is a big time commitment. You have to quit your current job, and there was uncertainty apparently. But I know that PhD can provide me with opportunities that I wouldn't otherwise have. So it definitely opened the door to academia job. But in the industry, there are also many other positions from traders to economic consulting or maybe data scientists that would value the skills and the training, the knowledge that you develop in the PhD. So that's why I think doing a PhD was beneficial to me. And personally, I found myself enjoy doing analysis and working with data. So I think it will also fit me. So it's beneficial and fit me. Then why not?
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's amazing. Great.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you each one more question, but I'm just going to address a question to Andrew that's come through. So Andrew, first question, are applicants from a non-business background welcome to apply?
Yeah, that's a interesting question that I think a lot of applicants do kind of have coming in. So there's no specific criteria that's saying you have to have, for example, a marketing degree or a management degree like in operations or international business. But I think for a lot of applicants that come from different academic backgrounds, it's important to kind of tell the committee during the interview process, what is it that made you interested in researching this particular direction? For example, marketing, if you don't have a marketing background. I actually came from an economics background, and I've transitioned all the way over to studying psychology in the workplace. So it is completely possible. It really should be driven by what you're curious to kind of explore.
Okay, great. That's a fantastic answer. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, Kane, for a couple of minutes, can you tell us a bit more about your experience completing the 2-year coursework program? Because it is unusual for Australia. And then how did this coursework prepare you for the PhD and shape your research?
All right, so unusual, but highly beneficial. So personally, I really enjoyed my 2 years of coursework, despite having to maintain a first-class honors average, which is required of all PhD students. So even though it's called coursework, this time is really spent figuring out what you love enough to research, because it's so important to research something that you're actually genuinely interested about. And for me, that was gaming and live streaming. And I currently examine that in my PhD. But I didn't know that I wanted to study these things at the very start. I only figured it out at the end of the 2 years. So I definitely needed that time to figure things out. In fact, I had a lot of PhD ideas and thesis ideas that I wrote down in my notes. So if you do get accepted into the program, you should try and do that as well. So also in the master's, you have a major research component called special topics. It's basically a subject where you can research anything that your heart desires. And it was through these that I got to work closely with my principal supervisor and some other co-authors. And thankfully, one of these projects actually ended up winning an international award. So I guess to summarize it really, really simply, I like to think of the entire 5-year program as a piece of steak, and you marinate it for the first 2 years and you cook it for the last 3 years.
Thanks, Kane. I'm a vegan, so I'm not going to appreciate that analogy, but anyway, I can hear what you're saying. I think, that second year is really valuable, isn't it? So you can actually get to work with a supervisor and figure out your research interest before even entering the doctoral program, and then really start the ground running. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So Yu Yang, can you tell me a little bit about the types of research support and facilities available to you during your PhD?
Yes, certainly. So one reason that I choose Melbourne is because it provides lots of support, financially, but also non-financially. So in terms of financial support, as Kalvinder has already introduced, we have a generous financial support scheme, which is very important because you don't want to be distracted by other commitments when you want to maximize your research time. In terms of travel, because lots of conferences are held overseas, and Australia is far away from everywhere, so travel can be expensive. But thankfully, FBE has been very supportive in providing funding for like overseas travel for conference, or if you need to do field work. Personally, I just came back from Chicago 2 weeks ago, attending a huge international conference, and I will be going to United States again in January next year again for another conference. So FBE covered all these steps. That makes the whole planning things much easier. That's in terms of the financial support, and in terms of the non-financial aspect, I think Andrew already mentioned that we have lots of seminars in every department, which is really useful because you got to meet those big names in your area, and they really sit down with you to talk about your research. That's really important opportunity for PhD students you wouldn't otherwise have. Yeah, and of course the faculty, I think they're super supportive. And one thing I love the most about my program is that we have a very nice community within the PhD cohort. These are the people you're going to spend your at least 5 years with them, and likely will become your co-author, which you will kind of establish like a lifelong work relationship with them. So I think having this structure and having this PhD cohort is really one of, I know lots of other universities doesn't have this kind of structure, so it's harder to build a community, but I know in Melbourne you can have this. And yeah, that's really fantastic.
Yeah, I think you said something important, that your cohort and people above and below you, they are going to travel through your life with you, really. And, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So
I
Michelle,
heard actually, sorry, I was interrupting.
no,
But I just want to say, what people saying a co-author relationship between you and your co-author can be longer than a marriage. So you can imagine how important this cohort is.
I hadn't heard that one before, but I can see. Before I come to you, Michelle, I just have another question for Andrew just coming through. Andrew, can you tell us a bit more about the minimum requirement for this program? Are they strict or flexible? I can
guess
add to this.
It depends on which minimum requirements you're talking about. Why don't you cover the basics of the minimum for the university first, and I'll add on to that for our specific department, Kalvinder.
So minimum for the university is 75, but to come into our program and to receive a scholarship, it is you need a score of 80 and above. But every requirement is listed on the in the actual each sort of program sort of website. But Andrew, do you want to add on?
Yeah, so aside from just the minimum academic transcripts, I think a lot of questions that I've received as the program director is, what does it take to get into the program itself? So all of these past academic achievements, once again, I actually research HR topics, so this is something that we study, right? So past performance isn't a good predictor of future performance, but it gives us a signal of your potential aptitude. And so everything from your grades to your potential GMAT scores, if those are required for your given circumstances, or even just the potential research related things that you've done, whether you've worked as research assistant or you've actually published, papers at small conferences, those are all indicators that you're on the right track for thinking about research. And thinking about research, it's really this big change from, as once economics professor told me, from being a knowledge consumer into a knowledge creator. And so that transition is so hard. And as a committee as we're interviewing each of our applicants, we're really looking for indications that someone has the potential to make that transition and be able to think critically at a higher level. So does that kind of cover some of the points there, Kalvinder?
Yeah, I hope so. And if they don't, then maybe someone can ask the question again. But I think, that minimum requirement said is 75, but as Andrew said, there are many other minimum requirements, and just because you meet the 75, to complete your scholarship score, it could be research outputs that you've already engaged in, or some kind of RA work, or maybe your honours thesis was published or something like that. So that can be part of your really boosting your scholarship score, really. So,
and just to add to that, I know a lot of programs may have minimum GMAT GRE scores. That is explicitly not on our website. We do look at the GRE GMAT scores. So obviously, if you're scoring like 200s, that's a little bit extreme here, to say the least. But within a certain range, it's all kind of open to consideration. So we're really looking at holistics for the candidate, not just, look, are you past a certain score? Okay, so hopefully that clarifies a little bit for other things besides just the GPA.
Yeah, and then once you have submitted your application, there's an interview process, there's a selection process, then an interview process. And so, and that's a time where you decide whether this is the department, the faculty that you want to be placed in, and both sides as well, really. So it is, by the time we take you and you come, you're pretty sure that, oh yeah, this is a place that I want to come.
Can I slightly add on to that? I can actually attest to everything that they're saying. I barely made the cutoff as an applicant, but what really sold my application was what I knew and how I displayed that in an interview. So that should be more what you should concentrate on rather than the actual cutoff itself.
Exactly. Great. Michelle, just in case you thought you got away, can you tell us a little bit about the social and research culture, the culture here in Melbourne, and what kind of support do you receive from your supervisors and the department also? So I'd like you to talk a bit about the culture.
Yep. So in terms of the social culture here at Melbourne, we do have a PhD student society here. So currently I'm the president for that student society. That just got reinstated this year because of COVID. And Kalvinder and your team has been a great support for helping us reinstate this entire student society. And we managed to run probably about 5 events so far since we started in May. So there is a lot of social support here for PhD students, not just within your department, but also within the whole faculty here, so across the different departments that sit within this FBE faculty. And so, and we do plan to run more events, both social and academic events in the future. And so there is a lot more to come to this. And I guess the idea or the objective of our society is to foster this interdepartmental interactions, because sometimes you probably just want a fresh air from people who are outside of your department, so you can think outside of the box sometimes as well. So it's a great way to kind of create new research ideas and collaborate with people from different departments as well. And so that's kind of the social aspect here at Melbourne. And then in terms of the research support, we do have a lot of support for both from the faculty as well as from the university as well. So if you need any coding support, there's a lot of workshops that teaches you how to do R, Python, MATLAB, for example. And there's also a lot of writing focused workshops as well, such as Shut Up and Write. And then within departments, they also have their own brown bags, as well as PhD brown bags and journal clubs sometimes as well. So there's a lot of support that you can get academically here. And then lastly, what support that I get from my supervisor? Well, my main supervisor, Carson, is super supportive. I do have weekly catch-ups with him to touch base on my research progress. So that's been really, really helpful. And that started since I started my PhD program. So you get to have weekly catch-ups right from the start of your program. And that's been super helpful in solidifying all my project ideas and really getting me on track of my research. And I guess one of the most important part of your PhD is getting a good supervisor that works for you. Otherwise, your journey wouldn't be great, I guess. So that's kind of my take of the research and social culture here in Melbourne.
That's great, Michelle. Thank you. And thank you for being such a powerful support for, creating the community that we would like at Melbourne. And I think, we care about excellence in education and research, but we are always asking ourselves what creates a very healthy and positive culture. And, in a sense, the students are telling us that also. And so we are always responding. So, and Michelle has been an important part of that response. Yes, I'm going to ask you one more question each, and there's no more questions coming through at the moment, but there will be just 2 minutes each, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So Kane, Michelle, and Yu Yang, there are clearly challenges when completing a PhD. So how have you got through those challenges?
I'll go first. I'll just go with 2 challenges so I don't steal any of the others. So the first obstacle is that for any long-term journey, especially a 5-year one, procrastination is very likely to happen. And this is something I'm sure we can all relate to, regardless if you do a PhD or not. For me, the solution to procrastination is motivation. And I like to feel like I'm in control. So I always have a to-do list on my phone. I always update my calendar. And I'm also very generous with the time that I can use to procrastinate, because I do that a lot sometimes. And the second obstacle, and I think the most important thing for everyone, is balancing personal, social, and work life. I love road tripping with my friends, engaging with social media, going to the gym, and playing video games. And a lot of people ask me how I even have time, considering that I also do full-time study and part-time work. And the answer is very simple. I don't have time. I make it. No matter how busy you are, you shouldn't ever have to sacrifice too much of different parts of your life for the sake of your PhD. Some people do, but they end up getting too burnt out. And that's one feeling that you really want to avoid.
Great. That's really amazing response. Yu Yang.
Yeah, I actually joined the program in July 2019. And, you know, that means when after my first semester and COVID, this whole thing just began. And that was a big interruption to me. So after 2 years coursework, I faced this confirmation, basically, which will qualify you into a PhD as a PhD candidate. And I found it was hard to find the topics that you have to find the topics that is big enough to make a contribution to literature, but small enough so that it's doable. So that was a challenge I was facing. And because everything was online back then, so it was a bit hard to talk to people and interact with academics and also your fellow students. But I found the program coordinator of my program, Gary, who is now my principal supervisor, he was super supportive by the time. He encouraged me to explore ideas, even when some of the ideas are very rough. And he also made suggestions about which faculty member I should talk to. And when I was speaking to these faculty members, they were not just asking me questions or challenge me, which naturally they will ask you questions, but that help you to refine your argument analysis. But more important is they really help me to think about solutions and make very practical and very doable suggestions. I think this kind of support is really important for especially at the early stage of the PhD research. Yeah. So
Great.
yeah,
because it does take time, doesn't it?
Yeah, it took a very long time and can be difficult, but once you pass the confirmation, I believe you'll become much more confident. Yeah.
And then as I said, and the faculty, the department, they are here to support you.
Yeah.
Don't invest so much in PhD students and say do what you want. We're here to support you. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Michelle, what's a couple of the challenges and how did you get through the challenges?
So I guess I'll add to Kane and Yu Yang's point. So I think my biggest struggle was staying motivated, actually. So the PhD is quite a personal and lonely journey sometimes because you're doing your own research project and no one is really there with you this whole time. And so staying motivated and holding yourself accountable is very important. And I think that's quite challenging sometimes, especially when your research doesn't go as planned. There's failures in your data collection, for example, or your papers being rejected. It's just hard to stay motivated sometimes. But I think having a resilient mindset is very important here. At the end of the day, it's sort of like a mental game. And also, here's another analogy. A PhD is more like a marathon rather than a sprint. You have to keep working on it. You can't really procrastinate the whole way and leave it last minute and make that a sprint. It doesn't happen that way. Having a resilient mindset and really focus on both your mental and physical health is just really important here. Like at the end of the day, everyone can do research, but whether or not you can actually finish it and complete it is another thing. So for me it was
and on your emotional mental resilience. Really good. I just thank you for being all of you just so honest, really. you know, I think it's heartening to know that things always don't always go to plan, and there are failures and there are rejections, there are disheartenments. So it's like, what's your support structure, and how can you keep that balance to run the marathon?
Yeah.
Okay, so Andrew, is there anything that you would like to add to any of that before we go to the next part, the questions and things?
Sure. I'll just prime the 3 students and see if they have anything to add to this, and I'll give them a little bit of time to think about it while I add my own thoughts here. So the question that we often ask a lot of the job candidates that are coming into our department is, what do you wish you knew before you entered a PhD program, to help our students get a sense of what they could potentially be thinking about before starting on their journey? And so from my own experiences, it's well over a decade now since I started this process, is the number one thing that really comes to mind is this phrase, do what works for you. Is that you'll hear so many stories of other people's successes, but just because they were successful doesn't mean that their path is your path. Right. So you take what you can and you learn along the way from so many different people. And that's what all of the academics are really here to help you do, to find your strengths so that you can figure out the direction that you want to go as an independent researcher. And so the other analogy, which I'll give credit to Michelle for priming this thinking for me, is that I always explain this to the PhD students. You need to think about PhD training as a toolbox, and you're trying to fill that toolbox with as many different tools as possible. And so, for lack of a better word, for empirical people, we'll take the most basic analogy here of regression analyses. If you've been trained in just regressions, then in your toolbox, you have a hammer. Every single problem is going to look like a nail. So you want to broaden that toolbox as much as possible so that you have a lot of different perspectives to approach the same research question that you would be interested in doing. So those are kind of my takeaways that are my favorites to talk to younger students about. I'll open it up to the other 3 students and see if they have anything that they wish they really knew before entering the PhD program.
If you don't mind, I can go first. Yeah, so I wish I knew how to do more methods, because look, with research, there is a common thread. Phenomenons are easy to find, statistics are easy to find, literature is easy to find. Understanding every single method is not possible for any researcher. You focus on a particular method to understand your phenomenon. And sometimes what is expected in journals is a lot more complicated than what you already know or what you have learned. So finding ways to bridge that gap is, I wish I knew how to do that better at the start of my PhD, because I did still have some statistical knowledge and stuff like that, but they were good for understanding, but they weren't good for executing what I actually needed.
I think, you know, I think the coursework sort of goes to some way to help to bridge that back, you know, that gap. But I think in academia, you always feel, oh, I don't know enough as well, really. And I think my thing is, you know what you know, you don't know everything, but you're open to learning. So that's my sort of thing too. Thanks, Kane. Michelle, any comments to add to that?
Yeah, so I think for me, there's 2 things. Don't be a perfectionist. Don't try and make everything work don't make everything work perfectly. It's not going to happen. You don't have the time or the effort to do that. There's a lot more important things to focus on. And also don't afraid to ask for help and let go of your ego, because once you're doing a PhD, people around you are going to be experts in their field. So they definitely know a lot more than you. So don't try and, solve a minuscule problem all by yourself when you can get that fixed in, 10 seconds, for example. So I think, those are the 2.
Brilliant. Both are just brilliant.
For me.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, let go of that ego. And I think for me, whenever I sort of do the research training, it's like, you know, you are not your PhD. You're the one who does your PhD. So here's your PhD and here is you. And so if someone criticizes your PhD, it's a learning thing. They're not criticizing you. So for me, that gap has always been really important. But yeah, don't be perfectionist. Brilliant. Yu Yang, what are your top tips?
First of all, I definitely agree to Michelle that perfect is the enemy of good. Yeah, I think that's important to keep in mind, because I guess every PhD candidate sort of gets good grades back in their old days and tend to be too want to achieve perfection, but every paper it can't be perfect. And the other thing I think is important is to get prepared early, get prepared to think about what you want to work on. Start with small project, even when it's not so exciting, but it's good to start with projects. And also know how to play the game, because ultimately the program and also your PhD are meant to give you a job at the end. So know how to find a job, what you need, how many papers you need, how many publications you need, what kind of skills you need. These are super important, because 5 years looks long, but considering the amount of tasks we need to complete, it's definitely not long. But thankfully, all the faculty members, they have lots of knowledge about this, and they can guide you through, get you prepared for the job market.
Yeah, and I think just echoing what you've been saying is, Michelle, don't be afraid to ask for help. What a great advice. So thank you all very much. And so we're coming to the end of our presentation now, but I think what I would like to say is that, I hope everybody listening and viewing this can actually see how invested and how passionate everybody is about the program and the culture and supporting and creating a quality education and quality experience, really, where we focus on the whole of you. And I hope that passion and that, enthusiasm and that sort of, our experiences sort of come through. Great. So I will almost end by, if you would like this detailed slide. So if you would like to apply, this is the QR code, and this is the website. So I'll just leave it here for a second. So, and here, if you go onto this website, you will see this, and you have an idea of the graduate research degrees. We have 8 disciplines. Information about scholarships, I've already spoken about that. Information on, some experiences and visuals of our videos of our past students as well, just to sort of hear their voices, and just a recent webinar on our doctoral program as well. So lots of resources there, but this is the main information site, website, if you would like to apply. So yes, we are open. We have a few minutes now. We're almost finished. If you have any questions, now is a good time. Otherwise, if there are many questions which have been typically asked, and if you go to this website, there are frequently asked questions if you don't have anything right now, but you want to come back at a later time. But also, if you have any questions that are not on here that you still have, then feel free, please do, to email this email address, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. So have a look on this first. If it's not there, whatever you want, then email this address and we will definitely get back to you. Okay, so are there any questions in the background from anybody? So Simon, is there anything? All right, so it means that the background team, there's 3 of them, they are answering all your questions. So if there's nothing for the audience, so for the panel or for me, then we will close the session and wish you good day, good evening, good night, good morning, and we will hope to receive your application if you're interested in our programs. Okay. Bye.